How's it going, everybody? Alright, so that is quite the bold claim that I just made in the title, and in For Honor's usual tradition of only arguing extremes, I want to take it down a notch straight from the beginning. So let me elaborate on that. I've said it multiple times in the past that when you argue something in this game and someone not completely agrees with every nuance of it, then both sides start throwing hyperbole after hyperbole at each other. So when you read the title, then please keep that in mind, that this is not an absolute statement. It is not feats and only feats and 100% only the feats that elevate the character into meta status. There are many other factors, but I think we don't give feats enough credit for why we consider many heroes so strong. The moveset is omnipresent and not on a cooldown and doesn't need to be unlocked. But once feats are available, they do have a massive impact. But why do I even bring this up? This Saturday we're gonna have another round in the Dominion series. Last chance closed qualifier, I think. I'm getting confused with the names. It's the last qualifier before the big finale. So there should be pretty much exclusively good teams in there. And this tourney is going to be streamed and casted again by Ubisoft in an official capacity. And a common complaint from viewers is the lack of character diversity, meaning only a handful of them are picked. That's usually what people refer to as the meta. What characters give you the best results? There are only a handful of exceptions, mainly when people are one tricks and just play a single hero. I'll get more into these comfort picks later in the video, as I think there's another layer in why people might perceive certain heroes stronger than they actually are. But for now, let's look at the most commonly picked ones and at the recent shift that has happened throughout the Dominion series' lifetime. At the moment, almost all teams consist of Warlord, Centurion, Warmonger, Black Prior, and then maybe Shaman or Kensei. 6 heroes out of a roster of 28, 27 if you don't count Griffin that is not yet playable in this official Ubisoft tournament. Pretty much all games that have multiple characters to pick from have only a few that are competitively viable. That is unavoidable and can be observed in every MOBA, for example, with a constant shift of OP heroes. For Honor does see balance changes, quite severe ones sometimes, but it's not all that often that the top tiers fall out of favour. And this is where the feats come in, because we very rarely see feat changes, and more importantly, the discrepancy between feats is still so huge that despite nerfs, there are no real alternatives to pick, because you'd opt into a useless or previously completely gimped one. One approach to fix these feat imbalances has been made with the help of the rule set for those tournaments. I don't know how many of you are familiar with it, but let me explain real quick. For one, there is single pick in tournaments. And the second, more important rule here is that there are no duplicate tier 4 feats allowed on the same team. So if you have multiple Viking heroes, for example, only one of them can pick Fire Flask. While on one hand, this limited the extreme power of some picks, this also dragged down some others because of a lack of strong alternatives. I've explained this in the past, but a character's feat choices play a big role in terms of viability. So now let me tell you the story of how Shaman fell out of meta during this tournament, and why I think that feats played a major part in this. I've just recently argued with someone on Reddit about how strong Shaman's feats traditionally have been. She's had S-tier feat choices for a long time. The point of contention was traps in that discussion. Somehow people still haven't figured out how strong they still are, and a lot of others have never caught on to how ridiculously overpowered they have been in the past. And that's also my first thing I want to bring up for feats. Traps have seen many nerfs over the last year. And it's not just the very much needed fix that stopped us from placing feats within the ground or walls. If you don't remember, I've shown this in an old trap guide that generally explains why they were and still are so strong now. Much more in depth than I can, or rather want to explain in this video here today. But even after all these nerfs, traps are still a viable option, just not completely over the top anymore. Then Second Wind, which has for a long time been considered the best feat in the game, which ultimately resulted in a ban of the feat in competitive play. After the nerfs, it was allowed again, but by that time, Fury Flask was a staple choice for tier 3 and 4. In case anyone's not familiar with what I mean with Fury Flask, the tier 3 feat Fury has a self-damage buff component, and as we know, damage buffs, whether they are from feats or revenge for example, do have an effect on other feats, which means you can throw a Fire Flask and then activate Fury while the projectile is in the air to boost its damage. The potency of Fire Flask should be something known to everyone who's ever played against the Viking hero. Now, here comes the curveball though. Warlord is played, and Warlord has fuck all for tier 3 and tier 4 feats, except for that very combination. So, because of the rule that only unique tier 4s need to be picked, Shaman is left with either Nail Bomb or Scout. Scout has been nerfed into Oblivion, and Nail Bomb is very situational. It can be amazing, it can be an absolute dud. It's pretty much a coin toss. And don't forget Second Wind came back, so Bleed can be healed. And now, what other hero got released with 3 heal feats in his kit? Exactly, Griffin with his absolutely busted feats is, without a doubt, competitively viable and will be picked up by multiple teams. I'm not exactly sure what hero they plan on replacing, time will tell. But all of that, combined with the prediction of future developments, kicked Shaman out of most rosters. This was especially surprising when you saw it in both regions. EU as well as NA stopped picking her. Otto and Shixtus, the 2 most known Shaman players, have both dropped her. One in favour of Centurion, the other for Warmonger. Both their respective teams run both of these heroes though, so it was just a matter of player preference, I'd say. Shaman has now been replaced as a ganker. It's now Centurion's time. Hitstun reset with a pin plus a knockdown, which most heroes have an easy setup for, allow for very potent ganks that under perfect circumstances do more damage and feel less revenge than the Shaman counterpart. It might also be long-term experience that plays a role now. These players have seen hundreds if not thousands of Shaman ganks and know what to look out for, as the setup was pretty much straightforward. Centurion is more versatile in that department. But in the end, I think that the Feats selection did play a deciding role here. And because they play such a vital role and can decide matches, players will always opt for the much stronger ones, if characters are otherwise somewhat on the same power level. The irritating part was, like I mentioned, that players that played Shaman exclusively for so long switched off of her. Back in the day, you'd see people argue that more heroes are tournament viable because they've seen someone, let's say, play Berserker and win the tournament. But then, was it really just a Zerker? Or was it Barakat being bored and wanting to play his main? And even him, you exclusively see on Warlord these days. Comfort picks seem to not be a thing in For Honor, and champ diversity is probably at an all-time low. Sure, we've always had must picks, like back in the day Nobushi, the queen of mid lane. Or then Lawbringer. Could do, I guess, everything? Well, I'm sure we'll see further feat reworks in the future, and we can talk about that in a separate video, but for now, I just wanted to highlight that they are much more important when it comes to a character's overall viability than many give them credit for. But yeah, don't forget the Dominion series this Saturday, so if you're bored, might as well watch a few matches. I'll put a link in the video description. For now, I hope this video was interesting. Thanks for watching. Laters everybody.